Although the very notion of the Dragonseeds hasn't even been introduced into House of the Dragon yet, their presence and role in Fire and Blood is a really interesting component of the Dance of the Dragons. And the most intriguing of the bunch is a young girl named Nettles. The story of Nettles is an interesting but questionable one. As one of the Dragonseeds, she was a dragon rider who mounted the wild dragon called Sheepstealer. And like the rest of the Dragonseeds who managed to mount a dragon despite their tenuous connection to House Targaryen, she was ostensibly on the side of the Blacks, fighting for Rhaenyra to hold the Iron Throne. Fire and Blood characterizes her in this way. In the end, the brown dragon was brought to heel by the cunning and persistence of a small brown girl of 6 and 10, who delivered him a freshly slaughtered sheep every morning, until Sheepstealer learned to accept and expect her. Munkin sets down the name of this unlikely dragon rider as Nettles. Mushroom tells us the girl was a bastard of uncertain birth called Nettie, born to a dockside whore. By any name, she was black-haired, brown-eyed, brown-skinned, skinny, foul-mouthed, fearless, and the first and last rider of the dragon Sheepstealer. Nettles is obviously an interesting character because she became a dragon rider during the Dance of the Dragons. However, one of the biggest reasons why she is remembered and distinguished, even among the Dragonseeds, is because of her supposed relationship with Daemon Targaryen. During the Dance of the Dragons, while Aemond and Daemon sought each other out in the Riverlands in the hopes of finally defeating each other and eliminating the strongest warriors of their rival factions, Daemon didn't head to the Riverlands alone. Nettles and her dragon Sheepstealer accompanied him there to hunt down Aemond. The duo and their dragons used Maidenpool, the home of House Mouton, as their home base, and they spent their days flying through the skies of the Riverlands, hoping and constantly failing to find Aemond and Vhagar. These aspects of their camaraderie seem to be indisputed fact, but there are rumors and theories regarding the intensity and emotion behind the relationship between Daemon and Nettles, and historical accounts seem to characterize their dynamic in differing but often deep ways. The most generous interpretations of the alleged close relationship between Daemon and Nettles seems to present them as something between a father-daughter relationship and something resembling a My Fair Lady-esque Eliza Doolittle and Henry Higgins dynamic, where Daemon was attempting to educate Nettles about a more upper-class life that this low-born girl was unfamiliar with. There seems to be quite a bit of contextual evidence backing up this possibility as well, as this passage in Fire and Blood demonstrates. We have the testimony of Mushroom, and in this case the chronicles of Maidenpool as set down by Lord Mouton's maester. Maester Norrin writes that the prince and his bastard girl supped together every night, broke their fast together every morning, slept in adjoining bedchambers, that the prince doted upon the brown girl as a man might dote upon his daughter, instructing her in common courtesies, and how to dress and sit and brush her hair, that he made gifts to her of an ivory-handled hairbrush, a silver looking-glass, a cloak of rich brown velvet bordered in satin, a pair of riding boots of leather soft as butter. The prince taught the girl to wash, Norrin says, and the maidservants who fetched their bathwater said he oft-shared a tub with her, soaping her back or washing the dragon's stink from her hair, both of them as naked as their name days. Fire and Blood's historians seem to question Daemon's potential interest in Nettles as well, as they don't seem to think that she's his type. They say, the girl Nettles was young beyond a doubt, though perhaps not as young as those that the prince had debauched in his youth, but it seems doubtful that she was a true maiden. Growing up homeless, motherless, and penniless on the streets of Spicetown and Hull, she would most likely have surrendered her innocence not long after her first flowering, if not before, in return for half a groat or a crust of bread, and the sheep she fed to Sheepstealer to bind him to her. How would she have come by those, if not by lifting her skirts for some shepherd? Nor could Nettie truly be called pretty. A skinny brown girl on a skinny brown dragon, writes Munkin in his true telling, though he never saw her. Septon Eustace says her teeth were crooked, her nose scarred where it had once been slit for thieving. Hardly a likely paramour for a prince, one would think. However, some interpretations of Nettles, her relationship with Daemon, and her role in the Dance of the Dragons is a bit more salacious, at least according to Mushroom, as the historical account of their relationship seems to indicate that Viserys' fool thought that there was more to their interaction, as stated in Fire and Blood. Yet was fear of Vhagar the only reason Prince Daemon kept Nettles close to him? Mushroom would have us believe it was not. By the dwarf's account, Daemon Targaryen had come to love the small brown bastard girl, and had taken her into his bed. Although Mushroom is a bit of a gossip and a bit of a sleaze, the historians seem to grant his perception of Nettles and Daemon a bit more credence than normal, as, in light of what followed, we must surely judge that more likely than most of Mushroom's tales. And what they're referring to here is Rhaenyra's apparent perception of Daemon's relationship with Nettles. Although Daemon was never a faithful husband, the story goes that Rhaenyra essentially believed that Nettles was some sort of sorceress who had ensnared Daemon, and his only route to freedom was Nettles' execution. Fire and Blood characterizes Rhaenyra's outrage in this way. Queen Rhaenyra did not act at once, but rather sent for Mysaria, the harlot and dancing girl who was her mistress of whispers in all but name. With her skin as pale as milk, Lady Misery appeared before the council in a hooded robe of black velvet lined with blood-red silk, and stood with head bowed humbly as her grace asked whether she thought Sir Adam and Nettles might be planning to betray them. Then the white worm raised her eyes and said in a soft voice, "The girl has already betrayed you, my queen. Even now she shares your husband's bed, and soon enough she will have his bastard in her belly." The Queen Rhaenyra grew most wroth, Septon Eustace writes. In a voice as cold as ice, she commanded Sir Luther Largent to take 20 gold cloaks to the dragon pit and arrest Sir Adam Valerian. Question him sharply, and we will learn if he is true or false beyond a doubt. As to the girl Nettles, she is a common thing with the stink of sorcery upon her, the queen declared. My prince would ne'er lay with such a low creature. You need only look at her to know she has no drop of dragon's blood in her. It was with spells that she bound a dragon to her, and she has done the same with my lord husband. So long as he was in the girl's thrall, Prince Daemon could not be relied upon, her grace went on. Therefore, let a command be sent at once to Maidenpool, but only for the eyes of Lord Mooten. Let him take her at table or a bed and strike her head off. Only then shall my prince be freed. In an incredibly surprisingly sentimental turn of events for Daemon, his reaction towards Rhaenyra's rage and desire to rid him of Nettles was unexpectedly benevolent. When Rhaenyra made the decision to order Nettles' execution, she sent her decree to Lord Mooten, who was still hosting Daemon and Nettles at Maidenpool. She sent a raven bearing the queen's message to Manfred Mooten, Lord of Maidenpool. He was to deliver her the head of the bastard girl Nettles, who had been judged guilty of high treason. No harm is to be done, my lord husband, Prince Daemon of House Targaryen, her grace commanded. Send him back to me when the deed is done, for we have urgent need of him. Maester Norrin, keeper of the Chronicles of Maidenpool, says that when his lordship read the queen's letter he was so shaken that he lost his voice. Nor did it return to him until he had drunk 3 cups of wine. Thereupon Lord Mooten sent for the captain of his guard, his brother, and his champion Sir Florian Greysteel. He bade his maester to remain as well. When all had assembled, he read to them the letter and asked them for their counsel. This thing is easily done, said the captain of his guard. The prince sleeps beside her, but he has grown old. 3 men should be enough to subdue him should he try to interfere, but I will take 6 to be certain. Does my lord wish this done tonight? 6 men or 60, he is still Daemon Targaryen, Lord Mooten's brother objected. A sleeping draught in his evening wine would be the wiser course. Let him wake to find her dead. The girl is but a child, however foul her treason, said Sir Florian, that old knight, grey and grizzled and stern. The old king would never have asked this of any man of honor. These are foul times, Lord Mooten said, and it is a foul choice this queen has given me. The girl is a guest beneath my roof. If I obey, Maidenpool shall be forever cursed, and if I refuse, we shall be attainted and destroyed. To which his brother answered, It may be we shall be destroyed whatever choice we make. The prince is more than fond of this brown child, and his dragon is close at hand. A wise lord would kill them both, lest the prince burn Maidenpool in his wrath. The queen has forbidden any harm to come to him, Lord Mooten reminded them, and murdering 2 guests in their bed is twice as foul as murdering 1. I should be doubly cursed. Thereupon he sighed and said, Would that I had never read this letter. And up spoke Maester Norrin, saying, Mayhaps you never did. What was said after that the Chronicles of Maidenpool do not tell us. All we know is that the Maester, a young man of 22, found Prince Daemon and the girl Nettles at their supper that night, and showed them the queen's letter. Weary after a long day of fruitless flight, they were sharing a simple meal of boiled beef and beets when I entered, talking softly with each other of what I cannot say. The prince greeted me politely, but as he read, I saw the joy go from his eyes, and a sadness descended upon him, like a weight too heavy to be borne. When the girl asked what was in the letter, he said, A queen's words, a whore's work. Then he drew his sword and asked if Lord Mooten's men were waiting outside to take them captive. I came alone, I told him. Then forswore myself, declaring falsely that neither his lordship nor any other man of Maidenpool knew what was written on the parchment. Forgive me, my prince, I said. I have broken my maester's vows. Prince Daemon sheathed his sword, saying, You were a bad maester, but a good man. After which he bade me leave them, commanding me to speak no word of this to lord nor love until the morrow. How the prince and his bastard girl spent their last night beneath Lord Mooton's roof is not recorded, but as dawn broke they appeared together in the yard, and Prince Daemon helped Nettles saddle Sheepstealer one last time. It was her custom to feed him each day before she flew. Dragons bend easier to their rider's will when full. That morning she fed him a black ram, the largest in all of Maidenpool, slitting the ram's throat herself. Her riding leathers were stained with blood when she mounted her dragon, Maester Norrin records, and her cheeks were stained with tears. No word of farewell was spoken betwixt man and maid, but as Sheepstealer beat his leathery brown wings and climbed into the dawn sky, Chrkrose raised his head and gave a scream that shattered every window in Jonquil's tower. High above the town, Nettles turned her dragon toward the Bay of Crabs and vanished into the morning mists, never to be seen again at court or castle. It is undeniably surprising that Daemon would willingly let Nettles go when it was directly against Rhaenyra's decree, and that certainly does indicate some level of personal caring between them. However, what is not surprising is Rhaenyra's supposed reaction to the revelation that Daemon actually let Nettles go. Again, according to the historical accounts. By evenfall, Rhaenyra Targaryen found herself sore beset on every side, her reign in ruins. The queen wept when they told her how Sir Laurent died, Mushroom testifies, but she raged when she learned that Maidenpool had gone over to the foe, that the girl Nettles had escaped, that her own beloved consort had betrayed her, and she trembled when Lady Mysaria warned her against the coming dark, that this night would be worse than the last. At dawn, 100 men attended her in the throne room, but one by one they slipped away or were dismissed, until only her sons and I remained with her. "My faithful Mushroom," her grace called me. "Would that all men were as true as you. I should make you my hand." When I replied that I would sooner be her consort, she laughed. No sound was ever sweeter. It was good to hear her laugh. So while there is some debate regarding the particulars of the entire Nettles saga throughout the Dance of the Dragons, it overall seems to be a pretty straightforward situation. A Dragonseed girl claimed a dragon, she and Daemon developed some kind of relationship, Rhaenyra became jealous and enraged and wanted to kill her, and Daemon enabled Nettles to escape Rhaenyra's wrath. However, the story that is told about Nettles throughout Fire and Blood is extremely questionable, and it's plausible that nearly every aspect of it is actually a lie. Fire and Blood is meant to be written from the points of view and based on testimonies from in-universe characters, so every aspect of the recollection of events can be questioned. However, the story of Nettles is of particular interest because, frankly, a lot of it sounds like bizarre fanfiction. The first few clues regarding the dubiousness of this entire saga should be readily apparent from the absurd retelling from certain individuals. For instance, the fact that Norrin, the Maester of Maidenpool, is both the person whose testimony serves as the basis of this historical record, and he presents himself in such an idealized way that Daemon literally tells him that he's a bad maester but a good man, is laughably ridiculous. It also seems incredibly convenient that Maester Norrin and Lord Mooton do everything right and morally admirable, while Rhaenyra commands them to do something dishonorable. Similarly, despite the fact that Rhaenyra is in the most desperate situation of her life, she takes the time to tell Mushroom, "My faithful Mushroom, would that all men were as true as you," which literally sounds like self-insert fanfiction. But even from a broader context, a lot of the actions and versions of events that are presented within the text just don't make a lot of sense. It is of course possible that Daemon and Nettles had some kind of romantic relationship. But despite the beliefs of the weird old dudes who seem to define the historical record in the world of Ice and Fire, most teenage girls are not thirsting over 50-year-old men, regardless of how rich or famous those men are. But beyond that, the way in which the recounting of Nettles seems to present Rhaenyra makes her sound almost hilariously unhinged. Despite the fact that Daemon is a pretty notorious philanderer, and despite the fact that Rhaenyra seems to care so little about it that she literally works with Mysaria, Nettles' seduction is just a bridge too far for her. Furthermore, the misogyny in this summation of Rhaenyra's actions and statements is once again almost comically absurd. Rhaenyra, a queen regnant who is working to hold on to her throne and kingdom and is in the midst of a civil war that has resulted in the loss of many members of her family, becomes so unglued at the thought of her man cheating on her that she commands a lord to violate guest right in order to off her supposed love rival. Of all the things she has to be concerned about, including her own survival, it is one of Daemon's many mistresses that is her top priority. It's not exactly shocking that the historical record would be this misogynistic, but it's definitely hard to believe. However, while Rhaenyra's contemporaries undoubtedly reframed many of her actions to make themselves look better and make her look worse, there are likely some kernels of truth to whatever happened with Nettles. It seems improbable that the order to execute Nettles was a complete fabrication, and given that it's extremely hard to believe that she did it out of romantic jealousy, there must be a more logical explanation as to why Rhaenyra would take the time to get rid of Nettles when she was in the midst of so much chaos and seemingly tackling such bigger problems. The primary and most obvious explanation is simply that other Dragonseeds like Hugh Hammer and Ulf the White had claimed dragons for themselves and later betrayed the Blacks. It's not that surprising that at least one person who managed to claim a dragon might decide to use that power to their own ends instead of Rhaenyra's. And this was a pretty clear lesson as to why seeking out dragon riders may have been a mistake. So it also isn't a big surprise that Rhaenyra would decide to proactively rid herself of some potential traitors. And it's worth noting that Nettles wasn't the only Dragonseed she decided to get rid of after the treasons of Tumbleton, where Hugh Hammer and Ulf the White decided to defect to the Greens. However, it is still interesting because of how Nettles is presented in contrast to other Dragonseeds like Adam of Hull. Rhaenyra begins to question the loyalty of the Dragonseeds based on their bastardy, as bastards in Westeros are stereotyped as being traitors and untrustworthy. But the fact that the record of Nettles is taken so much further, that Rhaenyra seemingly goes out of her way to attempt to get rid of her in such a dishonorable way, and she characterizes her as a base-born sorceress who has bewitched her husband, is, simply put, pretty weird. Again, it could be embellishment, but it would seem that Rhaenyra had some particular axe to grind with Nettles, and it's interesting to speculate why. From a pragmatic perspective, getting rid of Nettles makes some sense, although she has not yet proven herself to be traitorous, unless Rhaenyra seems to think that having some kind of relationship with Daemon is betrayal, which her relationships with characters like Laena and Mysaria seems to indicate is unlikely. If Rhaenyra can't rely on her, then getting rid of her sooner rather than later is understandable. And, Laenor's retconned non-death in House of the Dragon notwithstanding, dragons can only supposedly have one living rider at a time. So if Rhaenyra wanted Sheepstealer to be available to a more loyal or trustworthy dragon rider, then killing Nettles was a necessity. But the reality of Rhaenyra's desire to get rid of Nettles particularly might have a more interesting and simpler explanation that is alluded to within the text itself. Rhaenyra allegedly says, "My prince would never lay with such a low creature. You need only look at her to know she has no drop of dragon's blood in her. It was with spells that she bound a dragon to her, and she has done the same with my lord husband." Now, it seems incredibly unlikely that some low-born teenage girl was a super powerful witch who enthralled Prince Daemon and a literal dragon with magic. But the beliefs about her that are being expressed by Rhaenyra, or whatever historian invented this particular quote from Rhaenyra, seems telling. Because what makes Nettles somewhat distinct in comparison to the other supposed Dragonseeds is that she didn't just try to mount a dragon and do it. She developed some kind of a relationship with Sheepstealer by providing him food. And although Sheepstealer rejected many riders, eventually Nettles was able to claim him. Now, the supposed basis of the Dragonseeds during the Dance of the Dragons was that these were Targaryen bastards who could ride dragons as a result of their Targaryen heritage. But the allusion to the possibility of Nettles not even being a Targaryen opens up a world of options that would understandably be terrifying to the Targaryen dynasty. Because, if we are to assume that Nettles was not a witch who could enchant a dragon, and if we are to assume that Nettles is not even a Targaryen bastard, then that simply means that she was able to tame and claim a dragon by developing a relationship with it. The Dance of the Dragons was obviously a time of extreme upheaval for the Targaryens and dragons as a species. But from the point of view of Rhaenyra, it's actually somewhat understandable why she might have a particular interest in getting rid of Nettles. She had already been double-crossed by Dragonseeds, but that betrayal honestly makes a lot of sense. If someone with zero connection or relationship with Rhaenyra suddenly has the power of dragons, why would they bother risking their lives and their newfound power for her when they can just use that power for themselves? But what would happen if the world learned that someone who has no special abilities and may not even be a Targaryen could become a dragon rider? If the common people became aware of Nettles and her relationship with Sheepstealer, then what exactly would stop them from claiming dragons themselves? Dragons are the foundation of the Targaryen dynasty, and their supposed inherent superiority and the justifications for their rule are entirely based on the fact that they have dragons, and their dragon power makes them gods among men. But if the people of Westeros actually realized that someone as common as a bastard teenager from Driftmark could claim a dragon with nothing more than some time and ingenuity, then that could present a horrifyingly destabilizing force to Rhaenyra's rule and the Targaryen dynasty in general. Not only could that put Rhaenyra's remaining dragon riders in danger, because there would suddenly be a really significant motivation to free dragons from their current riders in order to claim them, but it could ultimately put her in a position where particularly bold people could pose a legitimate threat to her and the Iron Throne as a whole by simply claiming a dragon for themselves and attempting to conquer Westeros. And many powerful lords with established status in the kingdoms could probably overthrow the throne with a dragon at their disposal. Although this is a great deal of speculation, it's also something that seems to make sense. Because yes, clearly the Targaryens have some especially strong connection to dragons, but it's unlikely that no other humans could ever tame that power or connect with dragons as animals and allegedly super intelligent creatures in their own right. However, if that possibility ever became public knowledge, it would obviously put Rhaenyra and every other Targaryen, as well as the dynasty itself, in imminent danger. This presents some other interesting questions about the historical record as well. Was Rhaenyra's jealousy and anger embellished by those who were present? Or did Rhaenyra actually act as if she were just an angry wife in order to conceal the fact that Nettles was a threat to her for a much bigger reason? It will be fascinating to see how Nettles is introduced to House of the Dragon and how her relationships with Daemon and Rhaenyra are portrayed, especially considering how much leeway this particularly biased Fire and Blood tale seems to be. Given that the Rhaenyra of the TV series doesn't seem to be the jealous type, it's hard to believe that her actions will be driven by anger over Daemon's affair. And it's honestly a bit hard to believe that Daemon and Nettles had an affair at all. But it'll be interesting to discover whether or not Rhaenyra's rageful jealousy was simply a flourish of misogyny that historians added to her chronicles in order to make her look even more incapable or unhinged. Or if this was a calculated move on her part to mask the potential true intention behind the assassination of Nettles. And it seems astoundingly believable that the true threat that Nettles presented to the Blacks wasn't as a rival lover to Daemon or a traitorous bastard to the cause, but rather an object lesson in the fact that the Targaryen control over dragons was little more than an illusion that they created in order to seize power. But what do you think? Is the Fire and Blood historical account of Nettles the Dragonseed accurate? Or is it completely unbelievable? Leave your comments and opinions below. And if you're interested in more content like this, like and subscribe.